Hey people, I've got another interview for you, once again courtesy of Alex Fidel of KSUN's Freethought Radio. Alex is interviewing Richard Christy, who was the drummer for Death, and he is also interviewing Chris Steele, who is the nephew of Chuck Schuldiner, and Chris is also the son of Beth Schuldiner, who is Chuck's sister. All links and credits can be found in the description, and as always, thanks for letting me use the content Freethought.
Hi, I'm Alex Fidel on Freethought Radio at KSUNradio.com. I'm here with Richard Christy. He's was the drummer for Death and is the drummer for Control Denied and Charred Walls of the Damned. He also hosts a show on Howard Stern Show and was one of the KKK members in Harold and Kumar Escape from Guantanamo Bay. And also on the line with me is Christopher Steele. He's the nephew of Chuck Schuldiner. And Chuck is, of course, the front man of Death and Control Denied. He is now passed away. But how are you guys doing?
We're doing good. Thanks for having us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so a lot of things have been going on with Death and Control Denied. The first big one was the essay contest where fans contributed $25 to help fund the completion of When Machine and Man Collide. How successful was that?
Yes, that went great. The response was amazing. I, along with my family, personally read every essay. And some of them were heart-wrenching, some of them were funny. Just a lot of mixed responses. And, it just went great. It's really cool to see that there's still a fan base out there, and there's, constantly new fan bases being, generated. There's kids that are 11 years old just discovering this music for the first time,
And you were the one who graded the essays, right?
I'm sorry?
You were the one who reviewed all the essays, right? Like for the contest?
Yeah, it was kind of three of us. It was me, my mom, my grandma, and we all just kind of went through them. It was a long process. It was a really small operation, but, it pretty much went seamlessly. It was great.
How many essays were there?
Oh, God. Just to give you a ballpark, I want to say around like 3,000 or 4,000.
Damn.
Yeah. So it was definitely a job in its own. I definitely took a break from everything just to kind of concentrate on that for months, and but it was totally worth it.
Yeah, I heard the essays were going to be published into a book along with many letters written to Chuck during his illness. Is that still going to happen?
Yeah, it's going to happen. It's still up in the air. There's a couple issues here and there. But
that's a cool idea. I actually hadn't heard about it. I love that idea.
Oh, no, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Something like that. That's really cool.
All right. This question is for both of you, but let's start with Richard for this one first. How did you first meet Chuck?
Well, I actually met Chuck at the mall in Altamont Springs, Florida, which is a suburb of Orlando. I had moved down to Florida from Missouri in 1996, in spring of 96, with a band called Burning Inside. And, I knew that Chuck lived in Orlando, and that was actually one of the reasons I wanted to move to Orlando, because we were deciding between moving to Tampa and Orlando, because in the 90s, the death metal scene was really good in Florida and specifically in Tampa. But then one of the things that made me decide I wanted to move to Orlando was I was a huge fan of Death and a huge fan of Chuck, and I thought, well, if I move to Orlando, maybe there's a small chance that I'll get to meet Chuck and maybe even jam with him one day. So, that was kind of the reason, almost one of the reasons that I moved to Orlando instead of Tampa. So we were just walking through the mall one day, my guitar player from Burning Inside and we walked into a bookstore, B. Dalton bookstore, and there was Chuck reading a recording magazine, and we both flipped out. We couldn't believe it because he was, our hero. And so we kind of milled around in the bookstore for a while, not knowing if we should say hi. We didn't really want to bother Chuck or anything. And we finally got up the courage to say hi, and he was the nicest guy ever. And he was so cool, and he was so happy that we were fans. And we ended up talking to Chuck for like 20 or 30 minutes. And then, for the next couple of months, I would run into into Chuck at metal shows and at parties and things like that. So we kind of got to know each other through mutual friends. He was friends with these guys in a band called Wicked Ways. So when it came time that he was looking for a drummer, they put me in touch with Chuck, and the rest is history.
That's cool. What about you, Chris? When was the first time you met your uncle?
Well, I guess at childbirth. You'd say. He was, I want to say like 17 when I was born. And still living at my grandma's place, and my mom was bartending, so my grandmother helped take care of me. So he was more or less a father, rather than an uncle. So he was always closely involved in my life, up until his passing.
So didn't he teach you how to play guitar?
Yeah, somewhat. Here and there. My mom wasn't very supportive of it. She didn't want me to be a rock star, but we definitely had our little jam sessions here and there. And I got the pleasure of watching him and Richard play in his little home studio a couple times. And yeah, I'm nowhere near the guitar player he was, but I definitely know how to jam.
Yeah, how was Chuck as a family man? Because I hear a bunch of stories that he's just like probably like one of the best people as like a family member.
Oh, totally. I mean, this man traveled the world, but the place he wanted to do the most was Altamont Springs, Florida. I mean, he loved it. He was definitely a Florida guy, through and through, and definitely a very good family man.
Yeah, and I know with Richard, I mean, you and Chuck both had great senses of humor. You made prank calls together, and especially during the time of his illness. Do you have any recorded ones or any ones that you particularly remember that just were just extremely hilarious?
Well, we never really recorded them. We'd just be in the studio practicing and rehearsing, and we'd take a little break. I remember one of the sillier ones we did that just comes to my mind for some reason is we called Circuit City and kept asking about what kind of circuits they have, and the guy was just totally confused, and that's one that comes to mind right away. But Chuck had an amazing sense of humor, and Christopher has an awesome sense of humor too, and I know that's something that Christopher and I love to talk about is I used to do these like cheesy low budget movies that I'd film with a home video camera, and Chuck always loved those, and Christopher would watch those with his friends when he was in school, and it's just it was always fun to be around Chuck and Christopher, and just such a great vibe, and we had a lot of fun on tour. We would bring all the Jerky Boys CDs on tour and just laugh our ass off on the tour bus, and it was a lot of people, they think of metal guys as being this real serious, humorless guys, but 99.9% of guys that are really scary on stage are really, they're just really down to earth, nice and funny guys off stage.
Yeah, I mean, especially like the guys from Cynic, like Paul. He's like the most mellowest guy I've ever met.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, well, I saw them here. I saw them in Philly and Orlando, and in the middle of their set, they had everybody do yoga.
Yeah.
So I mean, you want to talk about mellow metal guys,
Yeah. But it sucks that Circuit City's out of business. I can't steal that idea.
Well, something funny that we used to do on stage with Death is we would come out and do our encore, and we would play the theme from Charlie's Angels and to Pull the Plug, which is like the two most opposite pieces of music ever. And fans, especially like fans in Europe, we'd start playing Charlie's Angels, and it was so fun to look out in the crowd, and they'd be looking at each other thinking, what the hell is this song, And then we go into Pull the Plug, and they go nuts. But I also used to come out for the encore when we would play in Europe and in America. I'd come out for our encore in nothing but a G-string, like a song. And people they just didn't know what to think. I'd walk right at the front of the stage, and I'd look over the side of the stage, and Chuck and Shannon and Scott would just be laughing so hard. And we just had a lot of fun. I remember it was always the last show of our European tour and last show of our American tour. We'd always do something really funny and crazy. And the last show of our European tour, the band Benediction was out with us, and we played the Charlie's Angels theme. We did like a really long version, and they all came out with bananas and acted out like a scene from Charlie's Angels, like they were all detectives with guns, but they were using bananas, and so that was hilarious. And then when we played in Atlanta was our last show of the U.S. tour, and we were with Hammerfall, and we called ourselves the Waffle Heads, and we came out and played this really goofy song, and we all dressed up in Waffle House outfits that we had collected over the course of the tour by going to Waffle House every night, and so that was a lot of fun. We definitely had a blast on tour.
That sounds awesome. How was it when you guys met King Diamond? Because, like, speaking about Chuck being down to earth, like, part of the reason was that, like, he was a metal fan, not sort of like he didn't picture himself, or at least from what I hear in interviews.
Yeah.
How was he, like, in front of King Diamond?
Oh, man, we were both so nervous, like the whole drive to King Diamond's show in St. Petersburg. This was the year 2000, and Chuck had never met King Diamond, and I had never met King Diamond. And, yeah, like you said, Chuck was a huge metal fan, and we used to just go back to his house after rehearsal and listen to vinyl for like 3 hours, and Chuck would cook. He was an amazing cook, and we'd just eat food and drink a couple beers and listen to metal on vinyl. And so Chuck, yeah, he was a huge metal fan, a massive King Diamond fan, just like me. So we knew that we were probably going to get to meet King. It's kind of hard to meet King because he doesn't really hang around the venue a lot, just because he kind of, to save his voice and everything, and so we knew it was going to be tough to meet him, but Andy LaRocque had played on the Death album Individual Thought Pattern, and so Chuck knew Andy, and he had talked to him that day, and so we kind of knew there'd be a good chance we'd meet King, and we were both just so nervous, and we were thinking, we were going over like what we were going to say to him, and when we finally got to meet him, it was the greatest thing ever. He was just standing there in his makeup, smoking a cigarette right behind the stage, and we both, like Chuck and I, were just freaking out, and I think Andy did most of the talking because we were so nervous, and King was just so nice and like so cool, and he knew about the band Death and knew about Chuck's music, which was really cool, and it was just really amazing, and it was so cool to see, a metal legend like Chuck get nervous meeting another metal legend. It was really, it's just such a cool experience, and I'm so glad that we got a really cool picture out of it too. We got a picture with me and Chuck and King and Andy, which is I have it actually. I'm looking at it right now. It's hanging in my office.
That's killer. Is that going to be in the reissue for the Fragile Art of Existence?
I think so. I know. I'm pretty sure I sent that picture. I sent a bunch of pictures that I have just for my personal collection to Relapse. So I think they are going to put, like some photos that have never before been released into the reissue, which will be really cool.
Would you know if it's a digipack or jewel case?
Christopher would probably know that better. I'm not sure.
There's going to be 3 formats. There's going to be a digipack, jewel case, and vinyl.
Vinyl? Sick.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's awesome! I didn't know there's going to be vinyl. That's great because.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be like a deluxe gatefold, and they're really doing some awesome stuff over there. Yeah.
Well, Chuck was always a huge fan of vinyl. I mean, Chuck had a massive vinyl collection, and I remember when The Sound of Perseverance came out on vinyl, and Chuck and I were both like really excited because it almost seems like an album is official when it comes out on vinyl, just because anybody can make CDs these days, and anybody can put something on a digital download. But when you have an album out on vinyl, that's very rare these days, and just it makes it more special, I think.
So I assume the vinyl is going to come out at a later point.
Yes.
All right, cool. And as far as Machine and Man Collide goes, this pertains to both of you, whoever wants to answer. For Richard Christy first, your drums and Chuck's guitars are all completed, I assume, because when you record drums first. Did anyone else record, even if it is just like one riff or just like a little solo or any like kind of small part? And what exactly is left to record?